Hi, it's Jordan here. We just want to welcome you guys back. Today we have Brian Manderscheid, and really what we want to do is continue that conversation. I spent some time educating you guys on maximum funded life insurance and how it works, and you guys are really equipped now with regards to having an understanding of life insurance. And so what we want Brian to do is kind of compare that life insurance to all of the other vehicles that we look at when looking for saving for retirement. So if that's okay with you, Brian?
That sounds great, Jordan. Yeah, like Jordan mentioned, there's so many different financial vehicles that you can consider putting your money into, and oftentimes people make their best financial decisions when confronted with a comparison. So what we want to do, like Jordan mentioned, is compare the life insurance policy that is max funded versus not 1,000 different investments, but we're going to break it down into 3 different types of other vehicles that you could be putting your money into.
Perfect.
Before we get started, I do want to make a brief mention of the fact that we can actually create these wealth reports for you, and we're going to be pulling from the wealth report for Richard and Grace Turner for our discussion here today.
Yeah, and when it comes to that wealth report, we'll show you guys how to get access to it at the end of the video, but it's an extensive report. It's a very good report that we work on here in the back office as a team, and you're going to have everything from not only your comparisons, but the cost analysis, the rates of return. So you're going to have a lot of information to equip you to feel comfortable when looking at these comparisons. So it's an amazing report. We've used it time and time again, and we can't tell you how great it is and how fortunate we are to have this type of report and this system that Brian works on.
Great. Thanks, Jordan. So before we get started with the wealth report, it's important to talk about, with any financial plan, talk about the various risks that you may incur. And we're going to spend some time, not only in this video, but 2 additional videos on, again, the 3 most important risks to focus on during retirement. Number 1 is longevity risk. Number 2 is tax risk. And number 3 is the market risk. So if we talk about Richard and Grace Turner, they were doing great. They were diligently saving away and really just blindly throwing money into vehicles and trying to pick the right club or right product and hope that works out for them without addressing these 3 very big important issues. Now, we're going to focus on in this video specifically longevity risk. And this is actually one of the biggest fears that baby boomers have. And believe it or not, if you ask most baby boomers, they're going to tell you that they fear outliving their money more than they actually fear death itself.
Right, absolutely.
Now, just a personal story about longevity risk. Believe it or not, my grandmother is 102 years old today, and there are more people living to age 100 and beyond than ever before in our history.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just so you guys know, when we look at these reports and when we look at client designs, we're not only focused on that accumulation phase, everything that we've talked about up until now with regards to saving to get to that point, we're already thinking ahead on that longevity. How are we going to take that money out most efficiently? And that's really what the comparison does. It does a great job of showing once we've gotten to that point, what does it look like now when we've taken distributions from that point?
Yeah, very important phase, and we definitely don't want to run out of money when we enter retirement.
Absolutely not.
So we're going to go back and actually look at Richard and Grace Turner's situation, and a couple things to point out. First is the fact that we were using $46,000 for funding into the plan. Secondly, we weren't asking Richard and Grace to come up with $46,000 out of their pocket and out of their lifestyle. And instead, what we did was we redirected money that they're already spending, but spending inefficiently and mostly focusing on the taxable and tax-deferred buckets and completely neglecting the tax-free bucket. Mm-hmm. So what we're going to do is pull from the wealth report and look at the total benefits that we're able to create just from this one vehicle. And it's important to note that they have other things that they're doing. This is in addition to, not instead of. Right. And again, we're providing that tax and risk diversification with this as a part of their comprehensive plan.
Absolutely.
So when we look at the total benefits at age 95, you can see that we were able to create $4 million of tax-free income that they can use in retirement for living expenses, for vacations, to helping out grandkids through college or weddings, whatever that may be, a substantial amount of income during retirement. Now, as far as the longevity, there still is, at age 95, even if they live that long, about $1.8 million in an account value that they can continue to draw upon if they need it. And if they were unfortunate enough to pass away at age 95, they're leaving almost $2 million in a income tax-free life insurance policy on top of the $4 million that we're able to create for them during their retirement. $6 million of a total tax advantage benefit. Now, what we want to do with this comparison is basically compare an apples to apples. If we were to fund the same $46,000 that we're funding into our life insurance policy into three different buckets: a taxable bucket, a tax-deferred bucket, and a tax-free bucket. And Jordan, I have to probably address this, is we probably couldn't fit $46,000 into a tax-deferred bucket or tax-free bucket.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, when we're looking at our qualified accounts, our 401ks, there's limitations on how much we can fund into that tax-deferred bucket. When we're looking at our tax-free buckets, we don't have a lot of options when it comes to tax-free buckets. Really, the main one that we have is our Roth account.
Roth, yeah.
And when it comes to Roth, there's two things we got to look at, right? We have to look at if we're making too much money as a household income, we may not be able to fund anything into that account. And if we can fund into that account, it's going to be at a very low amount, in comparison to $46,000 a year, depending on the particular year. So yeah, you're absolutely right. We don't have a whole lot of room where we can fund that $46,000 into all those accounts.
That's a really good point, Jordan. And in addition to putting the same money in, we're taking the same money out. Now, one important thing to keep in mind is that we're assuming tax rates stay the same in this entire comparison, which, I mean, I don't know about you, but I definitely don't think that they're going to stay the same. If anything, they're likely to be higher.
Right.
Now, if we compare these three different buckets, the taxable, tax-deferred, and tax-free, what you can find is all three of these vehicles actually run out of money in, looks like, the late 70s to early 80s, and it's probably a lot shorter than life expectancy.
Yeah, all three of these accounts, if they're running out early 80s, that's before life expectancy for a married couple. So if we were to fund into our taxable account, like our CDs or our bank accounts, things like that, we're running out at age 75, give or take. And if we spend all of our premiums funding into our retirement accounts, like our qualified accounts, it's only taking us to age 80 in order for before we start running out of money and don't have an asset anymore to take income from.
Yeah, if we look at even farther in the wealth report, to the next page, you can see as far as longevity risk, Jordan mentioned that all three of those accounts, the taxable, tax-deferred, and tax-free, even if we could fund $46,000 into all those, they all ran out of money. Well, meanwhile, the life insurance policy is still a full head of steam, continuing to provide that tax-free retirement income for Richard and Grace Turner, with leaving a substantial benefit behind for their kids and grandkids and favorite charity.
Yeah, it's kind of showing that summary that Brian showed, and I'll kind of recap it again. But really, when you think about it, that's where the leverage comes into play that we've been talking about. So if we're funding in $46,000 for 19 years, and that's a total of $874,000 over that 19-year period that we've paid in. So we've paid in $874,000, but since we were also focused on that distribution phase versus just accumulating, we've actually been able to take out income on a tax-free basis totaling $4 million at age 95, which is past life expectancy, but as Brian showed, all these accounts are still flourishing. We still have death benefits. So when we kind of look at that wealth accumulation, that's where we're hammering all those green columns that we're after.
And to kind of summarize what Jordan mentioned with the summary at age 95, you can see, again, we're able to create $4 million in total tax-free income in retirement with our life insurance policy. Now, and also what I want to do is look at the value of each of these buckets, and you can see, like we mentioned before, the taxable, the tax-deferred, and tax-free all run out of gas, where the life insurance policy, believe it or not, is actually thriving and still accumulating and growing wealth, even in those latter years of life. So a couple takeaways that I had from this presentation. Number one, definitely the longevity risk is one of the biggest risks that we have in retirement. And with our plan, we're able to create a substantial amount of wealth into the later 90s and beyond that if we all live that long, versus those other financial vehicles all crash and burn, way before you wanted them to. Now, the last thing we want to talk about is we can actually create these wealth reports for you. And Jordan, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you guys have the ability to write down your information, create these, and we can create these reports for you. And really the best analogy that we use when creating these reports is just like, think about when you go to the doctor's office. When you go to the doctor doesn't just prescribe you medication right off the bat as soon as you walk in. And so for us to really, for the doctor to get a full assessment, he's going to ask you questions, he's going to take down information, then he's going to give you that diagnosis. And that's really what we're trying to do here, and that's what we do with this questionnaire is we're going to gather your information, we're going to see your picture, and then working with your advisor, that's where we're going to give you the best possible outcome for your specific situation. And so the report is amazing. I thank you, Brian, for coming and sharing with that, and where we can really see those comparisons. And what we're going to do in the next video is continue with that report since there's so much valuable information. And we're actually going to go over the cost analysis. And that's the biggest concern that we get when looking at life insurance is that it's too expensive. When we look at permanent life insurance, we hear a lot that it's too expensive. And so we want to do that side-by-side comparison with life insurance versus those other buckets, if you will, to really see if it is expensive. And what you'll find out, just a little insight, is that when we're properly funding them, you're going to be quite surprised at the overall cost of our life insurance. So thanks again, Brian, and we'll see you guys in the next video.